Welcome to the Badlands, a place I don't think I or anyone I'm going to talk to expected to be. My name is Jared, and for the last 9 months, I've been an out-of-work ad agency senior suit. My last role was the Regional Client Service Director at Grey Singapore, delivering work around Southeast Asia and India. I returned to London last year, fully imagining I'd been in another agency fairly quickly, as had been the case over the last 2 decades, but not so much this time. So I found myself wandering the Badlands. In these 9 months, I've noticed a few odd things in our industry, and I've also noticed a surprising amount of ex-colleagues and clients all in a similar position to me. So I thought it might be helpful and maybe interesting to talk to some of these people, to see how they're doing, discover their experiences, understand what they're looking for, and maybe shine a light on them and their talents, but most importantly, check in with them, as it's a lonely experience being in the Badlands. So please welcome Jo Janssen. Jo is an experienced brand and marketing director with an impressive career at well-known global FMCG brands and a lot of alcohol brands. We've never worked together, but we do know a lot of the same people. Today we discuss her time in the Badlands and how she's staying positive whilst offering up a lot of advice and help for others in a similar situation. So please welcome Jo Janssen. Jo, how are you?
Morning, Jared. I'm very well. Yourself? It's a beautiful, well, it was a sunny day here today, but I'm actually in really good spirits today, and I'm really pleased to actually be here to have a chat with you today.
Well, that's really sweet. Yeah, it's not too bad today. It was relentlessly hot in my podcast studio. Meaning my kitchen this week. So today's a gentle relief from it, and a pleasant relief. But yeah, I'm good. It's Friday. I've had a not bad week. What about you? How was your Badlands week? Before I ask you like your career summary, how was your week? All good?
I had a pretty good start to the week, actually. I had 2 interviews earlier in the week, which came about quite quickly, which is always quite lovely to actually have, and reassuring that you still got your skills and you're still actually wanted out there. And then I actually took advantage of my 2 kids being on residential at the same time, and actually just had a bit of a break and actually had a pause in terms of job searching, and actually did some recharge of the batteries, which I think is really, really important.
Oh, living the dream this week. That's amazing. That's
yes.
amazing. Well, look, it's a pleasure to talk to you. We've spoken offline a few times, and I think what's evidently apparent from my guests, like I'm a talk show host, like from the people I'm talking to, both the agency world and the marketing world are in similar situations where there's clearly a lot of talented folk out there who, for the first time in their careers, mainly are finding themselves kind of struggling to land their next role, which when I looked at where you've worked and the seniority you have, and it's again, you're one of those people now that feels like you should be working, and I'm sure you'll agree. But before we get into kind of your experience in the Badlands, I think it's well worth giving people a bit of a summary of your marketing career. And I touched on you've worked at a lot of global brands and a lot of alcohol brands, I see, which is super fun to work on, I would imagine. So can you give everyone listening, my millions of listeners, the Jo Janssen summary of career summary?
Career summary of me.
There's millions of people listening, Jo.
Yeah, I know. I'm so popular. I'm going to boost your numbers by millions as well.
Million and one next week.
Yes. So I live in London. I live with my family. They can probably tell I don't actually have a London accent. So I grew up in Australia, started my career in Australia, and then I moved to the UK. I have always worked client side, so predominantly in FMCG, so fast moving consumer goods, and predominantly in food and drinks. So I have worked on some wonderful brands actually in my career. So I've led brands like Walker's Crisps, Cadbury Chocolate, and then more in the last 15 odd years, I've done more in drinks. So I've led brands such as Foster's Beer, worked on Guinness, I've worked and led Jameson Irish Whiskey in the Irish Whiskey portfolio, etc. And I've also done quite a bit of innovation. So I've launched things such as 12 Bites and Jameson Orange, etc. So I've always had complete ownership of the brands in terms of, from the strategy through like to P&L ownership. So everything from, as I mentioned, the strategy through to the execution of the plans. So across sort of comms, innovation, everything from brand visual identities to, category and retailer stories, etc. So always client side, and that's been my career to date.
Amazing. And such great brands. When I first got introduced to you, I looked at kind of your bit of a summary. You think such fun brands to work on, and then some of the alcohol stuff I've done. I've done some alcohol accounts in the past, and I really enjoyed it. I had a conversation with a recruiter the other week, and there was something that come up where there may be an opportunity on some alcohol brand at an agency. I was like, I love it. Absolutely. It was so fun to do. It's such an
Yeah.
interesting and fun sector. It's tricky to navigate given the rules and regs that we put in place to kind of
Yes.
manage it, which I totally understand, but it offers up
Yeah.
such a unique creative
It is.
opportunity when you have to deal with those things as well. So I love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah, it is a fantastic industry to actually work in. I mean, you've got brands. Some of these brands have got hundreds and hundreds of years of heritage, and so you've got that balance between managing the heritage versus the here and the now, today, etc. But wonderful brands, and it is a fun category to actually work in. There is a lot of responsibility that actually comes with it.
Yeah.
Because you do have regulations and responsibility with actually in it. But it is a fun category. It's a lot about conviviality and actually people enjoying themselves in a responsible way. And you sort of you've got this stewardship of something that has hundreds and hundreds of years of heritage, and you're one you're a snapshot in time of actually managing that, etc. But it is a fantastic industry to actually be in. It is an industry. It's an interesting one because the drinks industry historically for a very long number of years has actually been growing a lot, but actually with the the financial crisis that we've gone through in recent years, etc., it is an industry that hasn't flourished as much as what it has in the past, and there has been sort of like less jobs. So you had the COVID effect, and then
Yeah.
it came in with the financial, the cost of living crisis, etc. That has had some impact on it. But I do think I am in recent times starting to see some more jobs starting to appear in the alcohol and drinks industry that weren't probably there in the sort of 6, 12, 18 months ago. So
Right.
there are some green shoots actually starting to come back there. But it is a great industry to actually work in, and so is food. Everyone eats food, so it's a fantastic industry to actually work in. So I think, yes, I've loved working in food and drinks. It might not be for everyone, but for me, I've really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a super fun industry, and given the challenges that the on-trade industry sector kind of faces at
Yes.
the moment, is super challenging in the UK. I saw that it even came up in the politics discussions this week, the elections discussion. Someone was talking about they'll do something to help the pub trade, which has clearly gone through a lot of changes in the last
Yes.
10 years, and certainly COVID,
Yes.
like you say, only compounded that. So, well, look, this just sounds like a podcast where we're talking about how good it is to work in alcohol. Maybe it's just a sign that it's nearly beer o'clock on a Friday. But look, so clearly you've worked at amazing places. How long have you been now in the Badlands, and is it kind of the first time in your career that it's been this level of, well, hang on, why doesn't this seem to be the jobs that I could get, or how have you found it, and how
Yes.
come you're
Right.
in it in the first place is an interesting
Yeah.
question, if you don't
Good.
mind sharing.
Yeah, good question. So if I wind back, beginning of 22, I was approached by someone I knew at CNC Group to actually help go in and turn around their cider portfolio. So their portfolio had been declined for about 8 years. Many of people had walked in and out that door prior to me, but hadn't actually turned it around. So I went in and did this contract and actually fulfilled that role of actually turning around that portfolio. So good, really good ticks actually there. It was sort of it was a contract that actually had done came to its time in terms of I delivered what actually needed to be delivered there. So I came about being in the Badlands, but not something because I wasn't per se actually made redundant or anything like that. Has it been different than any other time I have been looking for work? 100% yes. I mean,
Right.
I initially had two very quick interviews when I was, when I stopped my last role, and I thought, oh, this is going to be easy. I'm just going to walk this in. This is going to be really, I'd heard a little bit of people saying, oh, it's actually quite a tough market, and I was thinking, oh, what are they talking about? Two
Yeah,
quick
yeah, yeah.
interviews, but I ended up getting the silver medal on both of those roles and not the gold medal. So if you don't get the
No,
gold, you don't get the job. So I've really seriously been looking since about September last year.
right.
What I initially found was very, very, very quiet. And then sort of since the beginning of this year, I think there have been some more roles, or some roles out, more roles actually out there than what there were, say, pre-Christmas. But at that senior end, it's still, it's been light on. And yeah, so I sort of found sort of up until probably Marchish, I was getting quite a number of approaches, generally from more sort of SME businesses, etc., which I would love to help, and I think my skill set could really, really help. But what I was finding was actually the salary level in terms of where
Yeah,
they
yeah,
could go to was more sort of someone that was maybe me 10 years ago than actually
yeah.
me now, etc. So yeah, it's definitely not been an easy market, and I think initially when sort of started looking, you sort of feel like, oh, is it just me? Is it just me finding this difficult? And then I was like, but the more conversations I started to have with actually people, the more actually I realized, no, this is not just me. There are thousands of us out there who are highly experienced, who are wonderful people who have got into this situation not because they've been sacked or because they're underperforming in their previous roles, because of the financial, the cost of living crisis, or COVID, and then the cost of living crisis. Actually, the easiest thing for companies to actually get rid of or to try, balance their books has actually been people, and so there's a lot of us actually out there. So yeah, it's been an interesting learning experience for me. I'm I've always kept positive in the whole process, etc. But it's definitely not an easy market. And I've spoken to recruiters who've been in the game, some of them 20, 30 years, etc. And they've said that they've never experienced a market
Yeah,
like
yeah.
this. So it's sort of it's really trying to find try and find your feet in there and actually cut through is quite a challenge.
No, hugely.
Yeah.
So your timeline and what's becoming apparent, the more people I speak to, the timeline is quite similar. And I
Yes.
think on my episode with Rosie McPhail from Major Players, Rosie specializes in the senior marketing placements, and yeah, she gave a really good deep dive into the kind of the state of the market. And clearly, 18 months ago was when the kind of overcorrection was required from the overhiring post COVID. She explained it in detail that there was a huge overhiring kind of in 21. So then 22 kind of everyone got through it, and then 23 was a bit of a, oh, hang on, we're all bloated, companies are bloated, budgets are bloated, and when
Yes.
you layer on all the various global nature of the economy, and then some of the disasters that had kind of been hit at home from a government point of view, a budgeting point of view, and kind of some of the disasters that have led to some of these kind of financial issues that the country's in at the moment, just all
Yes.
compounded with then people, like say, people being a layer of folk who historically would have been seen as a great asset. The cost of those people was not sustainable given the state of the industry as a whole and maybe the country as a whole. And I think you're right to
Yes.
say it feels incredibly personal when it's you, but it's almost I think the longer you're weirdly in it, you start to realize actually it's nothing to do with me per se. It is a thing that I'm now part of. It's like a broader
Yes.
thing that you're part of, and it doesn't feel like it gives you that should give you any solace or hope, but it slightly does. It does for me. I'm a bit like, why it's not. You can, if a job comes up and you don't get it, that's on you. But being
Yes.
in the position in the first place, or the kind of length of time that you're dealing with now, is not based on you as a person. It's just
Yes.
the circumstance we all find us in. I don't know how
Definitely.
useful it is for people to hear this, but I think, yeah, it certainly helps me, and the conversations I have with people like me and you start to go, hang on, we're all just in this weird time period where this is just our turn to kind of take a beat, and whilst things correct around us, if you can sustain yourself throughout, you probably will get back in. Everything's cyclical, and
Yes.
it will correct itself if you can hold on and stay in the game. Then that's fine. Some people can't, and I think I do see stories around people really struggling, and some people who are a bit more in a position where it's like this is shitty, but I'm okay at the minute, and I can carry on looking. But
Yeah,
I don't know what my
exactly. I
fucking
mean,
point
everyone.
was. I don't know what my point was
Point is,
beyond
I think,
saying to everyone, hang in there. It's fine.
yeah.
Hang in there.
I mean, everyone's situation is different in the sense of, your personal situation, your personal financial situation
Yeah,
will be different as well, and what you can actually do, and whether, you really need that interaction between people or not, etc., etc. So everyone's situation will be different, but I think there is that consistency theme of actually, there's a lot of us actually out there. But I would say that, what initially I did think, oh, is it just me? But no, it's not just me, but there is a really wonderful and supportive community out there of open to workers, etc. And just completely ignore all this BS about whether having the green banner on is good or bad for you, etc. Do what's actually right for you, and if you think it's the right thing to actually have it on, have it on. Personally, I think it's been more helpful for me to have it on than not actually have it on. I did a little trial of taking it off, and actually it made absolutely no difference of actually taking it off, so I put it back on. And I think, there was a couple of months ago, there was this whole, more sort of stuff going on about, you shouldn't do it. It's making you look desperate and all that sort of stuff. Actually, I think that flipped back on itself, and actually more people actually saying that actually more supportive of actually having it on. So yeah, there is a wonderful supportive community actually out there, and there's some crappy things that you'll go through. You will waste a lot. There will be a lot of your time actually wasted. We unfortunately in my household, my husband actually lost his job at the same time, not through just, it was a crappy situation, and so he was looking at the same time, and between us we've had 6 lowball offers within our household, which is sort of like, oh, really? That's not a great thing to actually have. You will get that. You'll get the lack of communication. You'll get the ghosting and all that sort of stuff. You'll get. I got to the final stage on something that it was an incredible amount of work in terms of presentations and all that sort of stuff, and then 3 weeks to get the rejection email. I'd already worked it out in that time frame, and actually I had a fantastic person internally who was keeping me afoot as to what was actually going on there. You'd also get things where you'll be going for jobs, and then you get to the final stage, and actually then they'll turn around and say, oh, sorry, actually this job wasn't approved. There's all those funny things actually going on, and you will do a lot of free consulting. Actually, there'll be a lot of big tasks, etc. Or you might also be asked to actually, I've been asked quite a few times to take quite significant salary cuts. I mean, I'm talking sort of 15, 20 years ago in terms of what salary I was on back then. I was like, oh, no, we're not going there. So, there is lots of funny different things actually going on out there, but, there is a wonderful supportive community within it, and I've found that that's been a really, 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 really helpful to me as well in being in this process. But you're definitely.
I was just going to say, look, the open to work thing, I think you're crazy not to put it on if you are open to work. End of story. It's like, why wouldn't you? It's like, why wouldn't you tell someone that you need a job? No one sat around thinking, I wonder if that person's working. I wonder if I can.
I know.
It's like, no, just tell people. I don't even entertain the kind of other conversation about it.
It's BS.
If you need to put it on. And then the kind of ghosting and stuff. Yeah, look, it comes up all the time, and I've experienced it. Whatever, I'm kind of over it a little bit. Like, yeah, sure, whatever. If that's the way that it's been done at the moment, then that's the way it's been done. I did see someone got absolutely annihilated. It was a recruiter. I don't even think they're in the UK. I think they may have been in the US, which is equally going through a tricky situation like the UK. I've had a few friends from over there kind of say it's not dissimilar to what's going on out in the US at the minute. And I saw a recruiter put on, he thought it'd be wise to say, ghosting is a form of communication. It means we're not interested in you. No one's, and it was like, what an arsehole. And he got absolutely piled on, absolutely annihilated. And this person was trying to say, by not contacting you again, that is feedback. And I just thought, well, dude, you're not.
It,
Clients aren't going to be lining up to work with you
yeah,
tomorrow because it was so ill-judged, and it just
yeah,
made me laugh. I was like, well, you go, son. But
yeah.
yeah, so
That
it's like I kind of understand what his point was, but it was like the humanity has been lost if that's a
yeah,
new form of communication, not saying anything. Because it doesn't work
that
with my wife. It doesn't work with your child. It doesn't work with your friends.
no,
It's like,
no,
why would it work
no.
at work, you know?
Yeah,
So
that's that's a sort of like an arrogant, out of touch way of actually
yeah.
saying
No, he got
that, etc.
absolutely ruined. It
And
was so
yeah,
funny watching the comments. I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. Like, just watch this guy get destroyed. And then I was thinking, maybe he's a
but
genius and maybe he's just done it for interactions and
clickbait.
kind of yeah a little bit and but I didn't think it didn't seem that smart. You never know.
No, yes,
Well, look, yeah, you've clearly gone through a time period like not dissimilar to mine, and it's a lot of similarity in terms of patterns of things popping up. You told me something offline which I think is super useful to hear, in that as much as the ghosting thing's real, almost the opposite is some people have come back to you, right, way down the line, and to them
yes,
it seems like normal, but you've gone, oh, I thought this had disappeared. Can you just give that, just let people
yes.
know that that is a thing as well? Because I think people need to understand that.
Yeah. So I've had it where like you've missed out on something, or it just actually goes silent, and then they've come back, etc. Months and months later, etc. So I think my one thing would be, don't burn your bridges, because you don't know per se what's actually going on. It's not great to experience the ghosting, but definitely don't take it personally, because it's not a reflection on you. It could be a reflection on many other things actually happening. But don't take it personally, and don't burn your bridges. And and sometimes they do actually come back, and so something can potentially have happened internally or whatever. So I have had people come back after months and months of silence. So yeah, don't burn your bridges. I know sometimes it's really tempting to fire off something and go like, oh, like blah blah blah, etc. But try not to actually,
Oh no,
potentially
no,
try
no,
not
yeah,
to actually
yeah.
do the
I know I've been blacklisted at one agency in London based on my response to their rejection, which in the heat of the moment last year, I was like, I sent the shittiest email back to this company. I was just furious more at their process rather than, I didn't care that I didn't get the job. I cared at how they'd handled it and how they'd kind of talked about how they'd surmised my reason for not getting the job. It just felt so ridiculous that in the heat of the moment I replied, which it should have been one of those, well, I'll put a pin in that and come back to it because I disagree, and I didn't, and it's because I was in the heat of the moment. So clearly I won't be working there based on my choice language that I used in replying to them. But you're right, it's things. I've had numerous conversations with people this week, and clearly there's a little bit of movement creeping in, and I think post
yes,
can and all that type of stuff, new budgets coming in for second half, and there's
yes,
always going to be peaks and troughs, and the peaks and troughs we just need to get a little bit closer together and not being as drawn out as maybe they have been over the last
yes,
12, 24 months. And I think you're right. It's showing up for stuff, agreeing to like, yeah, I'll meet with you, even though you might know it's not, there might not be right for you today. You never know what's going to come
yes,
next week or the week after. And
yes,
from when you've been working, things change really quickly, you know?
yes,
Yeah, so
yes,
it's an important part of this process. Equally, I had a conversation with someone this week who is going to do an episode. He's not out of work, but he'd be a great person to hear from. And he was talking about the importance of managing your brand, as in your personal brand, and really showing up to yourself, going to things, and just keep going in because you never know what door that might open just by saying, yes, I'll speak to that person, or yeah, I'll come and meet you. I know you don't know work on at the minute. It's an important part of it, weirdly. And it feels like
yes,
it's quite a time suck or no, I need to be getting paid for this. But I think if you've got the ability just to think it might open up something down the line, then it's worthwhile doing it all.
yes,
If you can.
yeah, true.
Um,
I mean, you never
but
like. I think
no, go on.
just
Sorry,
that
sorry,
one
sorry.
thing there in terms of the importance of actually personal connection and actually seeing people in person is actually really important in this sort of Badlands situation, because the we're all humans, and we actually, we do need that human connection actually. So if you can actually open up conversations, and go speak to people, and ideally do more of it actually in person than actually over Teams, you'll find that I found that actually, I've had some of those conversations and actually done it, and actually nothing's actually come about it per se, but actually I felt walked away actually feeling just, feeling sort of that you've had that time,
Just
you've had that connection,
energized.
etc., and
Yeah.
you feel much more energized of it. And
Yeah.
then I've had some wonderful things actually come out of that as well. So I think actually, personal connections and actually getting, in person time is actually really, really important. And one thing that I have been really slightly blown away by is actually the number of people who've just messaged me on, predominantly on LinkedIn, and just said, look, we'd love to have a coffee with you. Saw you did this post on such and such. I don't have anything at the moment, but how about we just have a meet and just catch up, etc. And I've had quite a lot of those, and it is actually a really lovely thing to do. So, it's lovely if you're actually a candidate, but also if you're on the other side and actually, that people are actually looking, if you can actually give them just a bit of time, and if you
Yeah.
don't have anything, be really, really clear that you don't have anything, but actually it can actually give someone who's in this situation a really big boost.
Also,
So
everyone loves a free coffee or a free lunch, particularly if you're. So, um, I couldn't agree more. And
yes,
I'm go- I'm going to be organising a Badlands meetup because I've met a lot of people virtually like this through the online studio that I use. But yeah, I'm going to be. I'm fortunate to be meeting some people next week, and then I'm going to organise a bit of a Badlands meetup. So watch this
fantastic,
space for that, millions of
brilliant.
listeners. In terms of, because I've seen you be equally honest and open in your communications on LinkedIn, but equally trying to be super positive as well. And I've seen you do a load of stuff around how you're managing your health and mental health and wellness and stuff. Is such an important part for people. Do you have any basic advice for people on that? Because I know you've been doing it, and I think it's really
Yeah,
important for people
yeah.
to hear what works for you, and then they can try stuff.
Yes, I think, like, I mean, if I sort of step back a bit and think about what's really worked for me in this time that I've been out of looking, etc., posting on LinkedIn has actually been really, on the whole, has been really positive for me, and it's actually really helped raise my profile, and it's probably one of the main things that actually has opened up conversations. And I'm very down to earth, I'm a very honest person, etc. So I talk about I try and more talk about the positive side of things than actually the negative side of things. I think I'm probably just naturally more geared that way in terms of the positivity of it, etc. But I think, on the whole, if you can, in terms of try to try to stay positive and actually really believe in yourself, like, you're going to get far more rejections and no's than you're going to get yes. And if I've had those few moments of like, I could just do this job with my eyes closed. How come I've been rejected for that? I've tried not to actually take it personally and actually really keep the belief in myself in terms of, I'm not past it. I'm not too old. I'm still able to actually do a lot of this stuff, etc. And also try to actually be really resilient. Like, you do need in some way to have your tough shield up and actually be really strong, etc. So, it's definitely not an easy market, but if you don't believe in yourself, no one else is going to believe in you. So you've really actually got to try and actually do that. And, I've found, like, there's been certain times where, like, if I'm being honest, I'd probably say 90 odd percent of the time I've been positive about the situation. But actually, in May, I found May really, really tough. So I got rejected for a job that, I knew I could do really well. There was a bit of personal stuff going on, etc. I just lost my mojo. And actually, maybe, the months had been going
Yeah,
on, etc., with it, etc. So I just gave myself a bit of a break and thought, just cut yourself some slack, Joe. Take some time out here actually, and recharge my batteries, etc. So, I think that's really, really important. And, there's that, people will structure their days differently, etc. And we can come on and talk about structure, etc. But, some days you'll be just absolutely feel like you're kicking goals all day and actually moving things forward. Then there'll be some other days where you're just like, oh my God, this feels like I'm pushing brown stuff up a hill. It's really, really hard
Yeah.
day. If you're having those days, just cut yourself some slack. I mean, the reality is if you take a day off looking for a job, it's unlikely to have a massive impact on your success.
Not at the moment.
I'm not saying take every day off, because you do need to do stuff to actually get it. But if you are finding things if you're finding something really, really hard, try and actually lean into the stuff that you know actually lights your flame and actually really makes you feel positive, etc. Whether that's exercising or whatever it actually is, to try and actually rekindle that. So as so back to asking your question about mental health, I have been fairly resilient and tough in the whole thing, and I've probably kept, being positive about, probably, I don't know, 90% of the time. Not to say that I haven't had my days where I've, sworn, etc. But I think, it is to try and do what actually lights your flame and actually makes you, keep the positive side of things, actually, because if you, I find, there's some of the days where I haven't been as positive, you then get yourself into a spiral, and that's not a great place to actually be. And it's a really hard market. And if you spiral more, then it's hard to actually get out of that. So try and actually, do something. And whether that's, as I've mentioned, exercise or healthy eating or taking a break or actually, going and visiting someone or doing something that actually sort of pauses you a bit from actually the situation you're in, helps you actually keep perspective. I think it's really important to keep that perspective actually on the market, because it is tough, but don't take it personally, because definitely try not to do that, etc., because it'll make it even harder if you actually do that. So yeah, I mean, I think,
I was going to say,
majority of the time
stepping
I've kept
away
positive, but
from the
that month of
process.
May I didn't, and I sort of thought, right,
Right.
cut yourself some slack and actually pull out of this, etc., and do it. And there's we can come on in terms of how I structure my week, etc. But there's I think you got to do what's right for you. We're all different, and some people just want to go hard nuts at it for 9 to 5, etc. Others go, nope, I just want to do 2 hours a day. Do what's actually right for you, and then sort of try and actually at this, whether it's the end or the start of week, actually think, what were the real positives of this week, or what did I learn, what can I build from. And actually, if you're finding things that are actually really draining your energy, so for me, going on job boards, I think it's just like in some way peeing into the wind, because it's just, I find it really, really pointless, and it's a really low return. So I try not to put my energy actually there, and I know that actually, like, if I look back and go, actually, if I sort of listen to my own story, I know that actually vast majority of my roles have actually come about from, in the last 15 years, from like recommendations or direct approaches. So for me, my connections, etc., actually are probably the strongest area as to where I'm actually going to get a role. So for me, it's more important to actually be leaning in on that. And yeah, I have found that posting on LinkedIn has been actually really helpful in terms of raising my profile. Not to say I've always got it right. I haven't always got it right, etc. And some posts you'll think, actually, this is a great post, and it'll absolutely bomb. And then other posts you think, oh, it's mediocre, and it'll absolutely fly. So there's no, I don't think there's any hard fact in terms of which is going to work, which isn't, etc. But I have found that actually that has been really helpful for me. And even one of the interviews that I had earlier this week came about from someone who, when I worked at Danone, actually, and she just messaged me and said, here's this, etc. And very quickly that turned around to an interview, etc. So for me, that's been very worthwhile.
Hey, Joe,
I know other people are
Joe, just take a breath, because I think the amazing Riverside studio that I use, it's lagging today, so I just want to make sure it's capturing what you're saying. But just take a breath a second.
Okay.
It needs to catch up, because that was quite an explanation.
Okay, sorry.
Hang on, let me just see. See, I've said it before when I've posted these out. No professional audio specialists were used in the making of these things. It's just me and a thing. So let me give it a second. Give it a second.
Yeah, sure.
Right, I think we're okay.
Okay, sorry.
They've just added a load of features this week, which are great, but it seems to have I don't know.
Slowed it
Anyway,
down.
this is utterly nonsense for anyone listening. Me just talking about the thing I use. No, look, everything you said there. I'm hoping because some bits were slightly fading in and out, but I think it's might
Okay.
be recorded it fine. But you never know. But essentially, yes, like stepping back from time to time, kind of doing the things that you love to do. You know, life goes on. You kind of have to keep looking after yourself first and foremost.
Yes.
On one of my episodes, Hassan, he talked about the importance of that. Like it's so hard to kind of put yourself out there and show up to try and do the job hunting if you're not in a good place. So it's important to be kind of in a good place so you can really focus
Yes.
on doing it. So
Yes.
in terms of, I think structuring your week's clear as day based on what you were just saying. You know, it's you kind of do what's right for you. I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think what would be interesting is I'm trying to help manifest some things for people because it's like the more you do this industry, be it marketing or advertising, you kind of want to work on things that you love or brands that you love, and and it sounds like you have for a while. But in terms of, because you never know who's listening, Joe, right? The head of so-and-so could be listening, particularly when I
Yes.
send them it. I've taken to sending this to individuals now, so that's the level of hyper-targeting marketing I'm doing. But is there an ideal role or ideal sector that you'd love to work in? Because I think there's enough algorithms in the world now that this type of content, this type of stuff, you put that out there, we're in a place where you can network the hell out of it and you never know where it'll lead. So is there a
Yeah.
particular industry or sector or brand you'd love to work on?
I mean, I love working in food and drink. So I'd love to actually, if I was to stay or to do one, I'd love to stay in drinks because I really really do love it. I've never so I've worked at Diageo, I've worked at Pernod. My last role at CNC, and I've also worked at Heineken. I've never been able to crack the door of actually getting into Bacardi. I would actually really love to actually work at Bacardi. And
Well,
then
let's
the
just
other
say it
thing that
again. Bacardi. It might work.
like
You
an
just never
echo,
know.
echo, and
Bacardi.
echo, and echo,
Bacardi.
and echo,
So I just,
and out there.
if I had enough hashtags, that seems to be how it works these days. Sorry, I interrupted you, but
Yeah,
go
that's
on, go
right.
on, go
And
on.
I suppose um, one industry that I've not actually worked in, but I'm really passionate about, is actually sport. And actually, one thing I have done quite a bit of, whilst I've been looking for my next role, is actually volunteer. And so for my sins, I put my hand up to be like the vice chair of Middlesex girls cricket, because I'm really passionate about actually trying to get more sort of girls and women actually into sport. So
Amazing.
sport would be another thing that I actually wouldn't mind actually going into. I want a role where I love making a difference and actually being like the real sort of catalyst for change in the growth of brands. So and culture is another important thing for me in terms of making sure that it's a culture that's conclusive to actually growth and also supportive. But yeah, if coming back to your question, I do love drinks, and I'd love to stay with either stay within drinks or potentially go into sport. And then the other thing that interests me is to potentially actually do an NED role. So
Right.
actually start building that up as well. Yeah, I'm interested in sort of trying to do some stuff along that line as well, because I think
Amazing.
like longer term that would be quite good actually for my career to build some of those things up. So yeah,
So for
drinks,
people listening,
Bacardi,
for people,
NED.
no, that's fine. For people listening, I don't ask the questions ahead of time. But if I had have known, we would have done this one by drinking Bacardi the entire time. It would have been. It may have taken a slightly different turn 35 minutes in, but
It might have been a
um,
funny afternoon. Hey.
yeah, it sort of take the edge off.
Yes.
Well, look, that's amazing. So clearly, you're a talented marketeer and brand lead and innovation specialist. So Bacardi, come on, what are you doing? Is
Chop
there
chop.
anyone? Because you've touched on it from it can feel quite lonely, and it's meeting up with folk is really important. Is there anyone particularly, any heroes you want to give a shout out to? Because it affects quite a few people when you as an individual are out of work, and so
Yeah.
is there
Yeah.
anyone
I
you
mean,
can anyone you'd like to
I've
say? I'm
it's just
taking partners and husbands and wives out of it because it's too easy.
well, I have to say I have.
Unless they're not being supportive, in which case call them
No,
out.
they are. They are. I mean, I've had some wonderful sport. I mean, there's I've had some wonderful support from like people I've worked with at Diageo and Heineken,
Right.
Pernod, also
Nice.
Danone, etc. I mean, one lady, I'm sometimes like, should you shout someone out, etc. I mean, Fiona Curtin, I worked with Fiona when I was at Pernod, and she has been absolutely phenomenal. We've worked brilliantly together, but she's just a massive supporter for me. So yeah, she would be one of my people that I'd do a massive big shout out to in terms of it. But then I've had
Amazing.
lots of other people from when I say I was at Danone. I also like a few weeks ago someone who I've not worked with for about 15 years messaged me and said, "How about we catch up, do lunch and blah, blah, things like this." She's been absolutely wonderful and just so supportive. And bless her, she said, "Look, if you're still looking in a couple of months' time," she said, "I'll make a special project for you. You can come and work for me for a period of time." And I was just like, that's the sort of support actually
Yeah,
that's just
amazing.
just absolutely wonderful, etc. And I also think it's important if you're in this same situation as well, is to actually to give back as well. So yes, I mean it's not an easy one, but actually that as I mentioned right at the start, that personal touch and actually being, that having some supporters and allies is what's really, really, really does make a difference in this situation.
Yeah, for sure. Well, look, that's great that you've had a lot of support from ex-colleagues, and yeah, it does go a long way. I'm meeting up with a bunch of ex-colleagues next week for a few drinks, and some of whom are working and some aren't. So it'd be
Yes,
really fun
yes,
to catch up with folks, and it's really important. So,
it is.
well, look, I think clearly you're very talented, and it goes without saying that anyone listening who thinks that Joe would be a good asset and addition to their team, let's get in touch, because I think you're right. It's people that are going to solve these problems.
Yes,
It's network. It's reaching out to people and not being afraid to do it. I've had a few people say that they're really worried about haven't spoke to this person for a year or two. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. It just you never know, right? There's nothing bad's going to happen
exactly,
from actioning
exactly.
something. The only thing that's bad's going to happen is if you don't do anything. So
Yeah. The
I think
worst thing they can say is no, but actually
exactly.
what I have found is actually most people will try and actually help you in the situation, etc. And so long as you've not burnt your bridges in the past, or and generally, they know that you're a good person, etc., and the situation, etc. Vast majority of people will help, and actually you'll be surprised how far they might actually help you. So it's I
Yeah.
think don't be afraid, because as I said, worst thing they can say is no, and then it's clear. If they say no, it's clear, it's no, etc.
Exactly. And
But
you're no worse
but
off than you were the day before. You're absolutely no worse
yeah,
off.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
uh,
I have been really surprised at some people that have come back, that have just sort of seen the post I've done on LinkedIn and then messaged me, etc. So it's sort of,
nice.
lean into those opportunities, because it does really help.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, look, I can't thank you enough for your time. I know when people do hear these episodes, it's not necessarily designed to do much beyond highlight you and your talents. And I know we'll put this out there and we'll network it out there and get people to share it. But then equally, I think when people are listening to these, there's an importance around understanding that they're not alone, and lots of people are going
Yes.
through these things. So, thank you so much for sharing your experience and some of the things you do to kind of look after yourself in this pretty shitty period that you find yourself in. So, I think go and have a
Yeah.
Bacardi, go and have a drink of Bacardi this afternoon. Take the edge off, and then it's the a nice summer's weekend this weekend. So
Yeah.
Joe,
Th-
thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. And if there's any way that I can help anyone that's in the same situation, then just reach out to me, because I'm very happy to try and help.
That's great. Okay. Well,
Yes.
look, that's really sweet of you. So I'm going to stop recording now, but don't leave. I need to talk to you about something.
No worries.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can. Do you want me to turn my camera back on?
It's just leave it.